Do you remember COVID-19? The empty streets, the face masks, the panic, the uncertainty. Now imagine all of that, but underwater, because long before the surface world locked down, there was already a virus quietly making waves below. They called it COVID-7. It all started on an ordinary day beneath the sea. The year was 2007. SpongeBob SquarePants was flipping Krabby Patties like he always did, laughing with jellyfish, annoying Squidward, and living in a pineapple under the sea. Everything seemed normal in Bikini Bottom, but in the quiet corners of this underwater town, something strange was brewing. A microscopic invader that would soon turn paradise into panic. That morning, SpongeBob noticed a green speck on his hand. It tingled a little. Maybe he'd touched some bad coral. Maybe it was nothing. So he washed it off and went about his day, shaking hands, slapping backs, making food, and cleaning the crusty crab from floor to ceiling. What he didn't know was that the green speck was contagious. Very contagious. Within hours, other citizens of Bikini Bottom began itching. Green splotches started showing up on fins, tentacles, and tails. The infection, later called the ick, spread like wildfire. First a few cases, then dozens, and before anyone could react, the town was in full outbreak mode. At first, no one took it seriously. They called it a gross rash or sea acne. Mr. Krabs refused to close the Krusty Krab. Squidward blamed bad hygiene. But as the symptoms grew worse, full body fuzz, purple boils, even hallucinations, the town entered a frenzy, and all of it started with a sponge who meant no harm. What seemed like a silly kids cartoon episode at the time would, 13 years later, feel eerily familiar. Because in 2020, the world saw a real pandemic, and people began to wonder, did SpongeBob SquarePants accidentally predict the future? It didn't take long for things to spiral out of control. The green speck that SpongeBob had found on his hand earlier that morning, it wasn't just a rash, it was a fast-spreading fungus, and SpongeBob had unknowingly become Bikini Bottom's very first carrier, Patient Zero. By lunchtime, Squidward was scratching his face behind the register. Patrick had green slime oozing from his pores. Even customers leaving the Krusty Krab started noticing unusual itchiness and discoloration on their skin. What no one realized yet was that the ick wasn't just contagious. It was airborne. It was in the fry grease, on door handles, and napkin dispensers. It was everywhere. SpongeBob, being the overly helpful sponge he is, was constantly wiping things down, which ironically just helped him spread the ick to every corner of the restaurant. He scrubbed floors, he polished ketchup bottles, he even gave Larry the lobster a deep cleaning hug. SpongeBob didn't feel sick, so he assumed he was fine. He was cheerful, energetic, busy, but he was also the silent spreader. Sound familiar? Just like how real-world scientists would later discover the danger of asymptomatic carriers in the COVID-19 pandemic, Bikini Bottom was learning the hard way that you don't have to look sick to be infectious. By the end of the day, over 70% of the town showed signs of infection. The Goo Lagoon was shut down, boats were parked, public service announcements aired every hour on the Bikini Bottom news channel. Health officials in hazmat suits patrolled jellyfish fields with spray guns. Signs appeared overnight that read, "Stay home, protect your fish." The town's health director, Dr. Gill, held a press conference urging calm. "We are taking this very seriously," he said, although his own face was already covered in fungus. "We recommend social distancing, regular fin washing, and immediate isolation if symptoms appear." But not everyone listened. Mr. Krabs kept the Krusty Krab open, insisting it was safe. "We're essential, boyo," he shouted. "People need their Krabby Patties." He even offered a buy two, get one anti-ick towel deal, which only brought more infected customers inside. It was greed over caution, and it made everything worse. Meanwhile, Plankton used the chaos to try and steal the Krabby Patty formula, disguising himself as a health inspector. Karen warned him that breaking into a contaminated zone might be dangerous, but Plankton replied, "Danger? I am the danger." Outside, things got scarier. Schools closed. Jellyfishing was banned. Families taped seaweed to their vents, hoping to filter out the spores. SpongeBob, still unaware that he was the source, ran through town trying to help people, only spreading more ick with every touch. The outbreak had begun, and just like the early days of COVID-19, confusion and denial were just as dangerous as the illness itself. By day 3, Bikini Bottom was unrecognizable. Streets were empty, shops were closed. Everyone who could stayed inside their seashell homes, watching the news and waiting for updates. For the first time in memory, the city's usual bubbly charm had gone silent, and it all centered around one word: quarantine. The Bikini Bottom Health Authority officially declared a state of emergency. The ick was no longer a minor fungal issue. It was a full-blown public health crisis. They traced the majority of the cases to a single source: the Krusty Krab, more specifically a sponge who had been on every surface and in every face that week, SpongeBob SquarePants. Authorities moved fast. They closed down the restaurant and locked SpongeBob in a containment bubble, placed in the center of Jellyfish Fields under 24-hour surveillance. They told him he'd need to stay there for 14 tidal cycles. SpongeBob, ever the optimist, decorated his bubble with posters and tried to keep up his jellyfishing routine from inside his plastic sphere. Across town, more drastic measures were put into place. A no-swim order was issued. Citizens were told to only leave home for essential activities, like grocery shopping or medical assistance. Squidward, of course, was thrilled. "I've been preparing for this my whole life," he said, lounging alone in his house with classical music playing. The Krusty Krab's closure caused outrage in the business community. Mr. Krabs tried everything to get around the restrictions. He rebranded the restaurant as Krabby Care and offered Krabby Patties as immune-boosting superfoods. But his permit was revoked after a delivery driver contracted the ick from a contaminated spatula. Just like during COVID-19, the city faced supply shortages. There was a run on kelp wipes, barnacle sanitizer, and sea masks. Some citizens crafted DIY hazmat suits out of bubble wrap and clam shells. Sandy Cheeks, the town's resident scientist and squirrel in a dome, issued her own warning: "If y'all don't start listening, this ick's gonna spread like a jellyfish swarm in mating season." Despite the warnings, there were protests. A small group of fish gathered outside Town Hall holding signs that read, "The ick is a lie," and "Free the sponge." They claimed it was all a scam by Big Coral to sell more cleaning products. Mayor Anchovy called them a danger to sea coyote and increased patrols near the infected zones. Meanwhile, SpongeBob remained in isolation, waving at friends from a distance, unsure of what he did wrong. "All I ever wanted was to make people happy," he whispered, fogging up the inside of his containment bubble. By the end of the week, Bikini Bottom was split in two: the sick and the uninfected, the cautious and the careless. And just like in the early stages of COVID-19, fear, confusion, and misinformation became as dangerous as the ick itself. The truth hit Bikini Bottom like a dropped anchor. SpongeBob wasn't just a victim of the outbreak, he was the cause. A full investigation by Sandy Cheeks and her mobile bio lab revealed the cold, slimy truth. SpongeBob was patient zero, not out of malice, not on purpose, but because he was SpongeBob, cheerful, hyperactive, and always on the move, he had unknowingly spread the ick to nearly everyone. Everywhere SpongeBob had been that week turned red on the ick map projected during Sandy's televised press conference. The Krusty Krab, Jellyfish Fields, the Bargain Mart, even the boating school. The room went silent when she said it out loud. We estimate that 89% of transmissions link back to one sponge. It was the same kind of moment the world saw in 2020 when we started hearing about super spreaders. People who, without knowing it, passed COVID-19 to dozens or even hundreds of others. Sometimes it was at a concert, sometimes a party. In Bikini Bottom's case, it was a sponge with a bottle of cleaning spray and a whole lot of enthusiasm. The news crushed SpongeBob. In his containment bubble, he watched the broadcast on TV. "I'm a menace," he whispered, curling up with Gary. "I should have stayed home. I should have washed more. Everything." Bikini Bottom split again, not just by those infected and uninfected, but by blame. Some forgave SpongeBob, others didn't. Online sea blogs accused him of being reckless. Hashtags like Tucker Sponge Spreader and Ban the Bob trended on GooTube and Fish Talk. Conspiracy forums even accused him of working for Plankton as part of a bio attack on the food supply. To make matters worse, a leaked security cam video of SpongeBob cheerfully hugging customers at the Krusty Krab went viral. "He knew," screamed one tabloid headline. "Smile of a super spreader," said another. It didn't matter that he'd had no idea. The court of public opinion was already in session. Meanwhile, Sandy and the science team rushed to understand what made SpongeBob such a unique transmitter. His porous body traps and spreads fungal particles at 10 times the rate of a normal sea creature, Sandy explained. "He's basically walking aerosol." The ick was unlike anything Bikini Bottom had seen before, and SpongeBob, in his guilt and isolation, became a symbol, not just of the outbreak itself, but of how easy it is to accidentally hurt others when you don't understand the risk. He tried to stay positive. He filmed a daily video diary from inside his bubble, reminding everyone to stay safe, be kind, and scrub their fins. Some laughed at him, some cried, but slowly, day by day, more people started listening. Because if even SpongeBob, the friendliest, most optimistic sponge under the sea, could carry something dangerous without knowing it, maybe it really could happen to anyone. As the situation grew worse, the town turned to the one creature who had a shot at fixing it, Sandy Cheeks. Inside her tree dome, Sandy had converted her home into a full-on underwater research lab. Surrounded by microscopes, containment tanks, and stacks of sea charts, she worked day and night to understand the ick. "This ain't just some rash," she told reporters during a press briefing. "This is a fast-adapting fungal organism, highly contagious, and getting stronger." After testing samples from infected citizens and studying SpongeBob's porous body under a microscope, Sandy developed a possible solution, a treatment she called the Ick-Off formula. It combined acorn enzymes, coral extract, and a special stabilizer from electric eel mucus. The results were promising. Within 24 hours, the ick cells broke down and healthy tissue returned. Sandy brought her findings to the Bikini Bottom Health Authority. At a special emergency session, she presented her data to the town council. There were charts, microscopic images, a before and after demo using one of the infected anchovies. Approval was immediate. Production began overnight. The next day, SpongeBob became the first official patient to receive the formula. Sandy administered the injection herself, right through his containment bubble. For the first time in weeks, the green patches on his body began to fade. "This is our path forward," Sandy announced. "We treat the infected. We stop the spread." Distribution centers were set up across the city. Citizens were asked to report symptoms, follow isolation procedures, and receive the treatment as soon as possible. Mobile units visited homes, and fish lined up and quietly and cautiously want to get their doses. Not everyone believed in the treatment. Some questioned how quickly it was developed. Others worried about side effects. But with infection rates climbing and hospitals overwhelmed, most of Bikini Bottom accepted the formula. There was no room for pride, only progress. Within 1 week, infection rates began to drop. Jellyfish fields reopened. The boating school resumed classes. And for the first time since the outbreak began, Bikini Bottom started to feel like itself again. Science had stepped in, and it worked. Just as the ick began to fade, something else took its place: confusion, blame, and conspiracy. Some citizens didn't believe the crisis had ever been real. "I never got sick," one salty fisherman said on live TV. It was all blown out of proportion. Others claimed the ick was planted on purpose, part of a plot by Mr. Krabs to boost Krabby Patty sales, or a failed experiment by Sandy gone wrong. The wildest theory of all came from Plankton. Dressed in a tinfoil helmet and sitting in front of a crudely drawn chart, Plankton went on the Bikini Bottom news and declared, "The ick was manufactured in Sandy's tree dome lab to distract the public while Mr. Krabs moved the secret formula. Wake up, sheeple." He was escorted off air within 30 seconds, but the damage had been done. Rumors spread. Old footage of SpongeBob working during the outbreak was re-aired, with dramatic music added to make him look suspicious. A few fringe groups even accused him of being in on it. In response, SpongeBob gave a public statement from outside his bubble. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "I just wanted to help. I didn't know I was spreading it." Most of the town forgave him, but it was clear that the ick had done more than damage people's bodies. It had left a lasting mark on their trust. Schools taught new hygiene classes. The Krusty Krab was required to post health inspection grades in the window. Public buildings installed emergency cleaning stations, and every household received a preparedness packet from the city, complete with masks, disinfectant, and an illustrated booklet titled "Understanding the Ick: A Citizen's Guide." Bikini Bottom slowly returned to normal. The laughter returned. Boats cruised the streets. Music played at the Goo Lagoon. But something had changed. SpongeBob, though no longer contagious, kept his distance for a while. He spoke more quietly, he cleaned more carefully, and every time he felt a tickle in his throat, he paused, just in case. The ick was over, but its memory stayed. In the end, Bikini Bottom survived. The ick faded, the town recovered, and SpongeBob went back to doing what he loved most: flipping patties, spreading joy, and accidentally annoying Squidward. But something had changed. The outbreak had left a scar, not just on the town, but on how its citizens saw the world. They were more careful now, more aware, and deep down, many still remembered those quiet, frightening days when everything paused and the future felt uncertain. It's easy to forget that this all came from a cartoon, a goofy, bright, absurd episode from 2007. When it aired, no one thought much of it, just another wild SpongeBob storyline. But after what the real world experienced in 2020, watching Fungus Among Us feels different. It hits closer to home. Was it just a coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the show that always hid real truths beneath layers of jokes and jellyfish was pointing at something deeper, a fear we didn't recognize until it was already part of our lives. Because in 2007, it was just another SpongeBob episode, but in hindsight, it felt like a warning. And if you enjoyed this expanded look at the SpongeBob episode that predicted the future, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Let us know what other SpongeBob questions you'd like us to explore next.